The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Finnan, welcome to the Success in Practice podcast. Thank you for joining me today, mate. I appreciate the time you've taken.
You're welcome.
Just to give you guys a bit of background, Kevin is the owner and operator of Ride Natural Health Clinic in Sydney, Australia. He's been a qualified osteopath since 2009 after completing his osteopathic studies at the University of Western Sydney in 2008. He began his business with his wife Lani in the same year. He credits his wife with amazing support and leadership in the business. So that's amazing, mate. It's a fantastic bonus there to have. And he's married with 3 children and continues to call Ride home, where he grew up and went to school in a fairly middle of the road conservative environment. He mentioned to me that he worked at McDonald's and Woolworths growing up and delved into entrepreneurial adventures at school from a young age. And he admits that he had some traits that he would probably now describe as being likely ADHD-like. And so we could all probably relate to that a little bit, mate. He's still loving osteopathic practice, and he's a self-described generalist. He's developed a reputation for being an expert in the business aspects of clinical practice. And that is, I think, where we will get the best value out of Kevin today. He's built a large multidisciplinary clinic out at Ride Natural Health, which is home to 25 practitioners, seeing close to 1,000 consultations per week. There's some impressive numbers, so that's we should get some good value out of you today, Kevin. If there is someone who can discuss success in practice, it's definitely Kevin. He's one of those people. Kevin, welcome to the Success in Practice podcast. Is there anything that I've missed out there, mate? Is there anything you want to add?
Not that I can think of right now, Sammy, but thank you for having me, and I look forward to the chat.
All right, so I'm sure we'll kind of go down a few different rabbit holes, but I want to really try to give people the best value that we can, and I think that is to really explore your views on business and practice management, and that would obviously include people management and practice growth. I'd like to look at the micro and macro of running a healthcare business and really go deep diving into what is necessarily required. There are some things that you need to know, and there's a blueprint of getting these things right. It's not like we've kind of reinvented the wheel here. So Kevin has good insights onto the fundamentals, and hopefully he'll share those with us. And also, what are some of the challenges that Kevin feels like he's facing at the moment and in practice and in growing his practice? So we'd like to know about those. And so we want to also look at the current landscape of allied healthcare and the marketplace and speak specifically about osteopathy and osteopaths and how we're fitting into that environment and how we're doing generally. So is there anything else that you want to add to that, Kevin? Like, is there something that you feel you want to kind of talk about that I might have missed there?
I can't think of anything right now. Something will probably pop into my head as we talk.
So
see what we can fit in.
Feel free, mate, to kind of go into, if you want to go diving down to little rabbit holes there that you feel like we can get some good value, mate. You've got the know-how, and feel free to kind of express yourself as best as you want. Now, before I go into the business side of things, I do want to talk a little bit about the clinical side of things. You are an osteopath. You've been in the trenches. You know what it's like. And knowing you for the time that I've known you, I know that you have the financial freedom to probably not have to practice hands-on anymore, yet you still do. And so why do you do it? And what does your clinical week look like? Tell us about your clinical week, why you're still practicing, and what you're doing these days.
Sure thing. So the short answer there is I love what I do. I love doing the hands-on work, but the slightly longer answer is we've had this clinic location for about 15 years. And for the first decade or more, just like many practice owners, I was, my week was primarily or 90% hands-on treating patients. And I love that. I got energized by seeing patients. I Enjoyed taking them on that journey from arriving with symptoms that they didn't think they could be fixed, and addressing the symptoms, the clinical findings, and the lifestyle factors, and having come through that journey. And I think that's what gives every practitioner, regardless of modality, the energy to keep going day by day, week by week. And however, unfortunately, I'm allergic to the snow. Every time I step on the snow, I break a bone, or do some damage to myself. And so over the years, I've dislocated shoulders. I've shattered my leg. I've had snowboard injuries. I switched to skiing on the request of my wife to reduce the risk of injury, and then I ended up having a few more injuries. And so that forced me into a situation a couple of years ago where I wasn't able to see more than a handful of patients a week. And so that forced me to sort of focus more on the business side of things. And the timing worked fine because the business had grown to a point where I had enough practitioners working with me that they could see the patients that were coming through. I did miss seeing the patients though, so that's why I still get involved where I can. If the patient either really wants to see me, or it's a particular challenging case and the other practitioner, regardless of the modalities, wants a second set of hands, second set of eyes, I'm happy to jump in and just give my thoughts on it, and either confirm that they're going down the right path, thinking the right thing, or say, look, hey, maybe also consider these things as well. And so the clinical stuff, I love it. It energizes me. Seeing patients energizes me. And so I'll never give that aspect of things up. But yes, it's true. As the business has gotten bigger, I don't have a need to see patients. And that's a very fortunate position we've grown to. But I'll always keep one foot in it, I think, because that's what I'm trying to do, and I love it. Yeah. So maybe in a week by week basis, there's maybe a couple of hours a week where I'm doing clinical work, and the rest of it is jumping around between other business ownership type roles.
Good. Well, I think your experience there is going to count for a lot because to know what the practitioners go through, to understand the pressures and the responsibilities of being a practitioner, and having people rely on you for getting them out of trouble and getting them out of pain. I think that understanding that pressure will help you, navigate some of the younger practitioners through that minefield, because it can be a little bit daunting to kind of get out there and then have a lot of responsibility just cast on your shoulders. And so just a bit more into your clinical experience. You're a self-described generalist. Are you content with what you're doing right now in terms of being a generalist, or is there an urge to go into a different direction? So I know a lot of experienced practitioners tend to kind of get to a point where they want to do more, or they want to go down a different clinical path. Is that something that's tickled your fancy, or are you still happy with what you're doing?
I very much enjoy what I'm doing and what I've done. 90% of patients who walk through the door are presenting with something we see every day, every week: neck, back and joint pain, acute sporting injuries, and the like. Every now and then you see something a bit rarer, a bit weird and wonderful, and that comes along often enough to kind of add a bit of variety to my week, to my month. When I say I'm a self-described generalist, it's because I guess from a business perspective, when 90% of people walking through the door are going to have one of the same 10 or 15 or 20 presentations, it makes sense to get really good at treating those 10 to 20 presentations. To spend a lot of time getting really good at treating something maybe only one patient a year is coming in with. I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. I just say it just hasn't been my focus over the past 10, 15 years. I have started to learn other things. Occasionally I'll do courses that are just completely outside of what I do every day, whether it be a management of scoliosis course, or whether it be indirect techniques, which I don't really use a lot of. But I do like to do those courses from time to time, just to sort of vary things up. But for the most part, business decision and also ease of practice decision, most of what I do is just the generalist stuff.
Yeah. Well, I like that in terms of ease of practice. I mean, sometimes we can get a bit caught up in trying to make our life a little bit complicated, and making your life easier, especially as a practitioner, is play to your strengths. And that's one of the things that we do talk to the younger practitioners about, is to really improve their confidence by playing to their strengths. So given what you've just said, I want to kind of go back a little bit. I want to go back in time, and just to give people a bit of a background about you growing up. You grew up in suburbia, really, and went to high school, and you had a lot of entrepreneurial kind of activities and opportunities, and you kind of made those for yourself. You were running school canteens, and doing harbor cruises, and kind of different things to make some money, I'm assuming. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and how did those experiences shape what you're doing now in practice?
Yeah, sure thing. So yes, I grew up in West Ryde in Sydney. My parents still live in the house I grew up in. Went to public school. I got a interest in everything entrepreneurial from a young age. I remember playing board games such as Monopoly, and I always wanted to win more than, say, my siblings or cousins who were playing it for fun. I had to win. Um, as I got a bit older, as I got into high school, I never really, you know, our family, we never really wanted for anything. We weren't missing out. But I knew that if I wanted to buy a car one day, if I wanted to, spend money on social life, that I had to do it myself. And so very early on, I started taking on jobs and eventually entrepreneurial type endeavors. So even before I got out of year 9, I had joined the school's sound and lighting crew to do that when there were performances on at the school. And that I recognized as an opportunity that, many of these concerts and performances and presentation nights would have some sort of intermission, but there was nowhere to buy a coffee or a can of Coke or a chocolate bar or a packet of chips. And so I set that up. And so I essentially took over the school's second canteen, not the primary canteen for day to day, but it was used several times a week. And I ran that canteen from the end of year 9 through to when I finished year 11 or so. And around the same time, I won the school's vending machine contract. So my mum would drive me down to Target, Eastwood, once a week or so. We'd fill up the car with 30 packs of soft drink cans, and I'd take it to school and stock it up. And and so I realized there was an opportunity there to make some money from doing those sort of things whilst I was at school.
Let me, sorry, let me, I just want to stop you right there, because that's
Yeah.
an interesting point. I want to go down into that a little bit. You were obviously in school and given responsibility that was a little bit beyond your years. That's not usual. It's not a normal thing. And did you present that problem? When you saw a kind of a gap in the market there, did you present that problem to the principal, to the vice principal? Did you come to them and say, hey, look, there's a opportunity here to make some money, at these concerts, and the vending machines could do with a bit of an improvement? Did you go to them with that problem?
I did.
And
I
then
got along really well.
did you go to them with a solution as well? Did you say, look, here's a solution?
I would love to think that was the case. It was probably more the other way around, that the deputy and I got along really well, and I spoke to him a few times a week because I was on the sound and lighting team. And I think it was more the matter of, I went to him with this idea saying, hey, guess what? I've got this idea to run a canteen. And he kind of said, so long as it doesn't bother me,
Yeah.
go for it. I would have at the time sort of came across as, hey, look, here's an opportunity, or yeah, here's a problem, here's a solution, let me run with it. And I think the school's attitude was, hey, this is another one of Kev's bright ideas. So long as he's already got a key because he's on the sound lighting crew, so long as you don't cause a mess, go for it. With the vending machine situation, it was a tender process. So I was able to bid the most to pay the school for the vending machine contract, because I didn't have to factor in delivery costs, my parents' time to drive to Target or Big W to buy the cans on special. And so, my parents were supporting me in those endeavors because they wanted to encourage the work ethic. But I could undercut a legitimate business, I guess you could say, at the time, because I wasn't factoring in a lot of the costs that a legitimate business would have to incur.
So when you have like a young practitioner or one of your practitioners, and they maybe show some initiative and some kind of like ingenuity about practice, and they kind of show you that they're willing to take on more responsibility. Is that something that, I mean, this just kind of mirrors the story that you're telling me, and this is why I'm going down here. Does that make your job easier as a practice principal? Does that kind of, do you
Yeah,
say, look,
definitely.
yeah, here's the ball, run with it? Does that make your job easier?
100%. I very much enjoy having practitioners and therapists who have that energy and have ideas and want to run with it. Sometimes you do have to, for lack of a better phrase, rein people in a little bit, sort of say, hey, slow down a bit, focus on getting your core skills and, up to scratch first. That might be the focus for the first couple of years after graduating, as a rough guide or rough example. But after that initial sort of 18 months, 24 months, 36 months of getting those basics right, I'm more than happy to say, hey, you run with it, you do you, and come to me when you need me. I give my guys a lot of autonomy in the way they practice and the way they build their business and the way they retain patients and all those things. And so I guess that's my style is if someone's got a bright idea, I'll say, give it a crack. Worst thing, worst case scenario, if the worst case scenario is we lose a bit of money or we realize after a few weeks or months we went down the wrong path there, then that's just a learning opportunity. So it either works or we learn.
Yeah, great. Okay, so look, moving on from that, your family background growing up, you credit your nan for being there for a lot of your growing up years, and you mentioned earlier that you didn't have everything in life, but you didn't feel like you were missing anything either. But anything that you really wanted to get, you had to go after. And so, do you think there's been a shift in generations that's kind of faster and larger than what we've ever seen before? Like, if you look at different generations, from baby boomers to Gen Xers to Gen Ys, they're kind of like small jumps. But we talk a lot about millennials now. Has there been a bigger gap now between, say, Gen X and millennial versus baby boomer and Gen X? Has that gap grown faster and larger than what we've ever seen before? And how do you address that? Well, firstly, I want to talk about how you address it with your own family. You've got children, and I've got children too. I've got young boys, and the thing for me is that, I don't want them growing up with a silver spoon in their mouth, and I want them to kind of have to go and get things, but everything's so easy to get right now. And so, how do you address that, number one, with your own family? And then what are some of the challenges you're seeing in practice with maybe younger graduates?
Yeah, great questions. I think the generational questions are one that people could debate about ongoing for hours and hours and hours. But starting with family, so yeah, my kids are 11, 8, and 5. My 11-year-old in particular, sorry, he you can tell he has that entrepreneurial mind. Kids these age are so much more savvy with technology, so he's already got a YouTube channel, a couple of YouTube channels. He's already started looking at how to monetize them. He's asking me those questions. If he's resourceful in the sense that if he wants to find the answer to a question, he can go straight to Google and find it. Whereas, back in our day, we would have to ask our parents or ask a trusted person, and then we might get the right answer. We may not. We'd have to go to the library. We didn't know that we didn't know where to find the information. Now the problem is the opposite. There's so many answers out there. It's filtering out all the wrong answers to find the correct answer. And so I think the younger generation now are being much more tech savvy. And if they are motivated, if they have that intrinsic motivation to get out there and achieve what they want, they can achieve it so much faster than what previous generations would have. But then the flip side of that is things sometimes come so easy to that generation that unless they're particularly motivated to get out there and achieve it, then they can float along pretty easy and not develop these skills that will be useful to them later in life. How does that apply to the new grads I'm seeing now? Well, I'm sure a lot of practice owners could relate to, new graduates or, younger people who may work on reception for them. They don't know how to answer a phone. All the communication they do is over text message or over some sort of text chat, whether it be text message or WhatsApp or messenger chat or whatever it might be. And so to think that we have to train everyone below the age of 25 how to answer a phone call or how to make a phone call seems ridiculous compared to 20 years ago, but that's the world we're living in now. But in other areas, they're much more savvy. They can create videos for TikTok and Instagram. It's almost like they have grown up with those platforms available, and it's just they're native to it. Whereas for me, I've had to learn as I go how to use those things, and I still don't keep up as quickly as they learn it a lot quicker because they're in it every single day. Whereas I might dive into those things from a business perspective into Facebook and Instagram. I don't really do much TikTok yet, but I'm sure it'll come. And so I think the younger generation has those technological advantages, and if they are motivated, they're gonna achieve their goals a lot quicker. But there are a few limitations that come with that, with not having to make phone calls, not having to engage in conversations with people outside their own age group, and the like. That's definitely something I've observed, and I'm sure others have too.
So you're really talking about communication skills and more like interpersonal skills, and the more you have to actually do face-to-face with people and be on the phone with them, It's like anything, it's like, you need to train muscles and to get them bigger and stronger. It's the same with communication, interpersonal skills. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And so if they're not doing it as well, if they're just text messaging everyone and they're, everything, every other word's LOL, and be right back is BRB, and it's just going to be hard to build those communication skills. So would you advise younger graduates to maybe learn some of the more old school methods, like is there a gap there? Is there not a gap, but like an opportunity there for a refresher in terms of saying, well, hey, look, if I'm a patient, I've walked in and I've met this young person that's treated me, but yet their communication skills are sharp and they're very kind of with it, and they know, and it's just a warm feeling in the room because they're communicating so well. How important is that to building your patient list? Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you, and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode, and please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
Oh, great question. Look, I think not only is it important, excuse me, not only do I think it's extremely important, I think it is the key. It's the missing piece to a practitioner or therapist having a successful career versus not. I know of people who are fantastic clinicians. They're great at the hands-on. They're great at what they do. And I'll happily see them any day of the week if I need a treatment, but they don't have the soft skills that are required to communicate the treatment plan to the patient in a way the patient understands it, or follow up with the patient if the patient falls off their treatment plan. And so, we have this situation where there's practitioners who are great at what they do technically in the clinical sense, but they either haven't worked on or don't believe they have those soft skills to succeed in clinical practice. And the texting instead of phoning is just a simple example of that. But even outside of talking to patients, even just networking with people in your local community, the barista at the cafe, the hairdresser down the road, the chemist down the road, a huge portion of your success is going to come down to just people being aware that you exist. Yeah. And if you don't have those everyday conversations, you can't sort of hide behind your phone all week long and expect to get referrals from the barista, from the hairdresser and such. You've got to build those relationships with the people around where you work, and over time, word will spread of who you are, what you do, and so on. And so I think anyone who hasn't developed those skills, don't categorize yourself as someone who is shy. Don't say to yourself, I'm not the type of person who would do that. I'm not the type of person who would go out and talk to the local barista about what I do or what it might be. It's like approach from a different perspective, which is all of these skills are learnable. Find someone who does it well, and whether that be a formal course or just an informal conversation, and develop those skills, because they will only help you in your career, and they'll also help you in your personal life.
Yeah.
You know, my wife and I have been together. We've been together 20 years in November, and we've been married 15 years in April. And you know, I'm of a generation where we didn't have an app when we were dating. We didn't swipe left or right. We had to actually go up and talk to people.
Yeah.
These days, it's all done through apps, and so there's a skill there that is now going to be missing in a whole generation of people, because they don't have to go up and approach strangers and say, "Hey, can I buy you a drink?" And so rather than putting yourself in a category and saying, "I don't need to develop that skill," take it on as a little challenge, just like you would if you're playing a computer game. Take it on as a little challenge to say, "Hey, I'm gonna beat that level. I'm gonna develop that skill and practice that skill until I'm great at it." And that's only going to help them in personal life, and it's only going to help them in business too.
Yeah. Well, look, there's anxieties there when you're not a natural at it. There is going to be anxiety there, but the only way you get better at that is to just voluntarily expose yourself to some of that bit by bit, right? And you just, you know, you made me laugh there, because you said, you know, you didn't have to swipe an app to meet your wife, and oh mate, the anxiety of having to call a home phone number to talk to a girl back in the
Yes,
day,
and
not
the
even a
mum would
mobile.
answer,
And then you
and
would
the
just
mum would answer,
hope
and
that
she'd
a
say,
female answered on the other side, on the other line.
Yep.
Not a male. You
I,
just hope that just a female answered, and that would, you know, that was the first little bit of anxiety, and then it would get easier. But anyway, look, speaking of your wife, I just want to ask another question. You credit your wife with a lot of the business success that you've had, and she's been quite supportive and very active in the business. And obviously, choosing your partner is an important life decision. And I've heard another speaker actually say that one of the biggest life decisions that a man can make, and I guess a woman can make too, is to choose their life partner wisely, because you know they will help them or get in their way. And so, what are some of the important life decisions you think that people can make that will help them succeed, or at least not get in their way? You know, what are some really important life decisions that will help success in practice?
wow, these are the deep questions. Look, I think the big question. I mean, yes, your life partner is probably the most important decision you can make. You know, there's so many things that have to line up. There's the personality and enjoying spending time with them every day. There's also having enough hobbies that overlap, that you enjoy spending time together in your free time. You know, when it comes to the business side of things, for some people that's not a big deal, because you're doing two totally different career paths, and you know, home life may be completely separate to your work life. You know, your work life may just pay the bills, and your life is everything taking place at home. For me, when my wife and I started dating, she knew I was very entrepreneurially minded. She knew that I was going to open up a business one day, and she supported me in that. And we jumped. We went down that path very soon after I graduated. And the way I sort of might say it is, look, my wife would have never probably opened up a clinic or a clinic's business, and except for me, but also our business wouldn't have succeeded the way it did if it wasn't for her. Because I am very much, you know, shiny object, look over there, there's something new and exciting, let's go explore that. And I've dropped the ball or forgotten about the things that keep the existing business running and ticking along. And whereas she'll sort of rein me in and go, "Hey, hold on, forget about the shiny object over there, focus on the task you're trying to get done, get that bit done." And she does the week-to-week bookkeeping, things in the background, and the attention to detail spreadsheet stuff that I don't necessarily have the pay. Well, it's not my strength. I'm the shiny object, let's go this direction guy, and she's the one who sort of says, "Okay, now what has to take place in order to get going that direction?" So she wouldn't have started the business without me, but at the same time, the business wouldn't be the success it is now if it wasn't for her. And so, you know, choosing a life partner who aligns with your goals, well, in addition to all those personal things, I think is really important if you know, the entrepreneurial pathway is something you want to do.
What about something like choosing where you practice? You know, is that a kind of like a big decision that you could explain?
Oh, I think there's a few different ways to answer this. I think a talented practitioner can succeed anywhere, even in an area that's saturated. A talented practitioner, there's always room for the best. There's always room for a fantastic restaurant. There's always room for a fantastic sports car.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're talking about in general, I think, you know, there's areas that are easier to set up and thrive. There's within our profession, there's areas of Australia that are oversaturated by osteopaths. There's other areas which have no osteopaths. And if you want to take the easier path of growing a business and thriving, there's definitely easier ways to do it than opening up in suburban Melbourne or on the Gold Coast near the universities, or in a capital city in general. I think there's regional areas, coastal towns where there's no one around that you could open up and thrive within a couple of years. You may not end up having a practice of 25 practitioners, but you yourself will be successful without.
You'll do very well.
Really push. You'll do very, very well. And so, as people come out of university and they're thinking about, hey, where do I want to establish myself? Don't limit yourself to the suburb you grew up in or the city you grew up in. It's very easy to move around the country and around the world now. Take a few years and explore and decide, hey, where do I want to set myself up? Where do I want to be? If you can earn twice as much in an area and you can fly back to your home city a few times a year, that may be a better choice than setting up around the corner from 15 other people who are doing the exact same thing as you.
Well, if you're going to set up around the corner for 15 other people, then you should really consider getting some experience with volume, right? And so go and get the volume under your belt, and then when you come back to somewhere that is a bit more saturated, you'll have the confidence to be able to take that on. And you just touched a bit about kind of graduates coming out of uni. I want to talk a little bit about your uni experience. You mentioned that it was fairly a straightforward experience, nothing too complicated. But you gave me the building analogy, where you were given the tools of your trade, but you weren't really taught how to build the house. And there seems to be a gap between what university tells you practice is like and what practice is really like. That's what I'm seeing, and I just want to see if you're seeing the same thing. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how important you think it is to close that gap?
I think, well, it is extremely important. Our day-to-day job, our day-to-day task is taking patients on that journey from the patient arriving with some sort of clinical presentation, usually with symptoms of some sort, and then taking history, diagnosing, explaining the treatment plan, taking them along that treatment plan, and that might be months and months long from start to finish.
And is that the problem that you're seeing? Is that the gap? Like, that journey is not properly explained, and graduates coming out of university and they don't know how to take the patient along that journey. Is that the problem that you're laying out?
In a nutshell, that's what it is. Some people come out more prepared than others, depending on their background. But the analogy I sometimes use, which is, yes, a building industry analogy, is at university, I felt like we learned how to use the tools. So we learned how to use the saw, we learned how to use the screwdriver, the spanner. We may even learn how to read the blueprints to the house, but we never actually learned how to build the house. And so, that type of thing, maybe some people did get it before they finished university. I didn't. I learned how to use the tools, but I didn't learn how to build the house. That sort of took place after university. And maybe there's a few different ways of doing it, which is how we get these different, philosophies and approaches across the hands-on manual therapies, because maybe there's a few different ways to approach it. But that is something that I think if the university is included in the training, or if that was taught earlier on, that's going to allow people to succeed in their career a lot sooner and not drop off. I'd say that, osteopaths and chiropractors, most people come out of university expecting to work in private practice. So their mind's already sort of ready for private practice in a way. When you speak to new graduate physiotherapists, a good portion of them were not expecting to go into private practice, or at least they weren't expecting to go this straight out of university. And so sometimes there's a bit more of a steep learning curve for them, because first of all, it's not only all those challenges that osteopaths and chiropractors have too when they're a new graduate, but it's also just getting them ready for private practice and the conversations to take place there versus working in a hospital or an aged care center or in a rehab setting in a specialist clinic or something like that, where the goal is very different. And it's similar challenges, but I think osteopaths are they're set up with, they've got the right attitudes, the right base education. It's just that if they can just get that extra step in there of how to piece it all together, then they're gonna hit the ground running in their first few years of their career much better. And
did you have that? Did you get that by fluke, or did someone show you that? Did you have to go looking for it? Was there something
I think it's a little bit of everything. Yeah, I mean, I think when I first graduated, you
It
start
seems
seeing
like,
real patients.
sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
It seems like a big thing to leave to chance, right?
Yes, and I'm not sure if it's intentionally left a chance or whether it's just the way universities are
Mm.
set up with different units that are kind of not necessarily don't overlap too much. Um, I think all of us, but myself, I guess my experience was you sort of learn as you go. You make mistakes, and so you either get it right or you learn. And so as a patient presents to you and you're trying to give them your best, that might result in you reaching out to other more experienced practitioners and saying, hey, this patient's just come in with this presentation I've never seen before, or combination of presentations I've never seen together before. How should I approach it? And so I guess you learn as you go, as you need to learn it. And maybe that is part of the solution anyway, because you can't learn everything in theory before you go into practice. But that, at least in my experience, yes, was a combination of learning as I went through, real presentations coming to me and me, fumbling it until I made it, or, not faking it till I make it. I won't say that. I'll say, doing my best and then refining that and getting sharper as I went on, but also seeking out advice from people I knew had more experience in that area than me,
Yeah.
so that I could accelerate that process.
Well, you're prepared to fail a few times until you learnt it. But I
Oh,
think,
we all do. Yeah.
yeah, but there's only
Yeah.
so much failure you can handle in practice before it beats you down. You fail a few times with some really big things like progressive discs and people with massive pain, in their life, and emotionally it could be a bit of a roller coaster for you. So I think the first 2 years of practice are really important. If you don't get that right in the first 2 years, that's what I've seen is that you kind of you either just stay at the same level, you never really progress, and or you get out of it totally. You just don't take that extra leap and bound. Um, Okay, well, I appreciate that. That's really good feedback. You've mentioned routine as being part or an important part of achieving a certain level of success. Tell me a little bit more about your routine and what you mean by that. How does routine offer you freedom? How does it offer you success? And what does your routine specifically look like?
Great question. So part of my week has quite a bit of structure to it. Other parts of my week have almost no structure to it. When I went through, when I've had a significant injury and a lot of my clinical time has dropped down, I found myself with a lot of spare, for lack of a better phrase, spare time in the week. Like, there was tasks that had to be done, but you could do them anywhere. And my personality type, if it's not due tomorrow, then start it tomorrow, start it the next day. And so it's very easy to push tasks back and back and back into the future, and they never get done. And so what I find is what works well for me is having some structure to the day or to the week where, okay, that's the time of the week where I work on that particular task. It may be meetings, it might be marketing related, it might be just a task that should be done every week or whatever it might be every month. And so I use checklists a lot, and that probably comes from my background working at McDonald's. I was at McDonald's several years from middle of high school through to a few years afterwards, and part of that was doing management. And so, at McDonald's, they checklist everything, every single possible role in a McDonald's. There's a training video for it and a checklist for it, and some sort of frequency it gets done, whether it be hourly, daily, monthly, yearly, or whatever it might be. And so using those same concepts in any business, but in a clinical setting, just ensures that activities get done. And so throughout my clinics, even the most trivial tasks such as dusting over a shelf is on a checklist. In theory, absolutely everything is on a checklist. And so to give you an idea of how that might be used is the goal is not that we polish the mirrors twice a week. The goal, the outcome we're after is that the windows and mirrors always look polished and clean. And slightly different language there, but the idea is it gets checked probably more frequently than it needs to be, but sometimes the task doesn't need to be done because the outcome we're after is it's always looking clean. And that applies across everything else: so stocking up paper towel, marketing activities, team meetings, etc. So having checklists and having some structure as to when they get done has been a very useful tool. Otherwise, it's very easy just to get busy, to justify, well, I won't do that this week or this month because I didn't have the time. And there's times when we do decide, look, we don't have the time this month to get that done, and we can skip it. But that's really more for extenuating circumstances more so than best practice.
Yeah. Yeah, structure really gives you freedom, doesn't it? Like when you've got things structured and there's a routine, you know that things need to get done at a certain time and certain things have to get done. Well, then you know when you're going to have free time. And so, if you're just constantly having to deal with things as they come up, it doesn't offer you a lot of freedom. You'll constantly be worked over by the business very, very quickly. And so, yeah, no, that routine is really important. So tell me a little bit about your day-to-day role in running the clinic, and so what are some of the more challenging things that you're finding that you're coming across now, like in terms of, is it terms of practitioner retention? Is it in terms of, acquiring new patients? Tell me some of the challenging parts of your role.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of my day-to-day, I'm not too involved now in the day-to-day running of the practice. We have reception on from 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week in this practice, and several hours a week in smaller practices. And because everything's checklisted, for the most part, the day-to-day or the business will run without my presence at all. And that's by design. If people want further reading in this stuff, there's, Multiply Your Time is a great book that talks about time management and one strategy you can use. And I've implemented those strategies in my week. But in terms of, the challenges that we're facing are probably those that everyone faces. And that is, there's macroeconomic factors in terms of, rising interest rates due to inflation, also rising rents due to high immigration levels. They're affecting everyone. People have less discretionary spending budget, and therefore, even though some would argue that we're not a purely discretionary spend, there is an element of it. People will cut back on how frequently they might get treatment because of budgetary affordability reasons. And so, everyone's sort of experiencing that at the moment. They can sense the economy is tightening up, and that's all part of the long-term economic cycle. It's not bothering me too much, but, we feel it, we can see it. Part of that is, there might be a softening in new patient numbers coming through the door. So then we have to ensure, okay, do we have to tweak what we're doing marketing wise? Are we spending the money that we're spending on marketing activities wisely? And we're always split testing things. We're always looking at things going, are we getting a return for that activity and for the time and money invested? I think every business should be doing that ongoing, regardless of the economic climate. And so, yeah, look, a good portion of my mental thought goes into what is the best way to help these practitioners and therapists achieve their goals. Are we utilizing the marketing budget and marketing time we've got effectively? Is there anything they could be doing differently? How can I coach them on that? And that sort of leans into the people management side. Often if a practitioner is quiet, they don't want to take ownership of that. They don't want to take responsibility for that. That's the clinic can just spend more money on Google ads,
Yeah.
or social media ads, or whatever it might be. And we do. I mean, I think most practices would allocate a portion of their marketing time and budget towards those things. But there's, of course, many, many things that the practitioners and therapists can do themselves to build their own profile in their community. So amongst potential patients, but also amongst potential referrers, so that if and when the time comes that a patient needs your service, that you're top of mind, that practitioner comes into that person's mind first of all and books in with them. And so, a good portion of my time is sitting down one-on-one with practitioners and asking them, hey, are you utilizing your downtime to the best of, to what's going to give you the best return? If you had an hour or two with no one on the calendar, what did you do? Did you actually create a blog post? Did you create a video? Did you get out there and have a cup of coffee with the chemist who works down the road? Or did you just watch something on Netflix or YouTube and it kind of, just was justified as, I was learning about a topic that I'm interested in. But I mean, we're all guilty of it. We all do it from time to time. But those conversations come up quite regularly, especially when people aren't necessarily reaching the goals they've set for themselves.
Well, that's hard work though, isn't it? Like, it's
ongoing,
easy,
yeah.
It's easier to kind of just watch something online to try to get some education, but getting out there and actually doing the things that need to be done, and that's hard work. And we think that we're in a profession that we just open our doors and people are going to come and see us, and it still requires hard work. Your registration, your qualifications don't offer you the business that you think you deserve. You getting the results on the patients and helping people and then networking and growing your practice will give you the results that you deserve. Like, your registration certificate means nothing after it's hung up on the wall, and so you're right. But that's all hard work. Everything you've described there is just about it just adds to your day. When people really think about how much work goes into growing your patient list and becoming successful, it gets a little bit daunting because it ends up being hard work again. I want to ask you, you've had some business partners in the past, and you've also done it alone. And I mean, with your wife, obviously, but to me, that's a you and her are one. So you've had business partners, you've done it alone. Can you highlight some of the pros and cons of both experiences for me and for the listeners and the viewers? And if you were advising someone wanting to go into clinical business, for example, how would you advise them in this regard? Business partner versus going it alone.
I mean, it does come down to pros and cons. There's no right or wrong. My first business and the first few businesses I opened with on my own, and the downside of that is you're doing it all yourself. The upside of that is because you're doing it all yourself, you take ownership and responsibility, and you do it. And because it's being done your way, you kind of do it your way. I mean, you're the one doing it, you do it your way. Sharing those responsibilities and tasks with someone else has many potential upside benefits. And when I've had business partners and I've shared those responsibilities, then 99% of the time things go great, and you can focus on what you have to focus on, and things go well. Of course, in any business, there's always going to be times when you disagree on the best way to move forward, and that's when you have to have that conversation about, hey, here's how I'd like to see it done. How do you see it being done? And you've got to make compromises. Both people, or if there's more than two people, everyone has to make compromises to see the business grow and move forward. I don't think business partnerships are for everyone. I think there's lots of upside to it, especially when it comes to things like taking time off. So, in my experience, if I want to take a holiday, my phone is still always on. The team know that they can reach me if and when they need to. I mean, rarely does it ring, but sometimes it does. And sometimes it's, something can help with, but other times you're 5,000 kilometers away. What can you do? But you can at least talk them through the process. Having a business partner who is sort of covering for you for a week or two while you're away. I mean, I've never experienced that in all these years. I've always, my headspace has always been thinking about the business every day, if not close to that. And so, if someone wanted to go into a business partnership, I'd say, look, you've got to have those conversations right at the start of expectations on each other. Where do your, why are you going into, why do you want to form a partnership? What skill set does that other person have that you don't, that they're going to feel, they're going to make your life easier, and vice versa. It has to be win-win. And, the business partnerships I've had, they've all been great. But there has been times throughout that partnership where there's a bit of friction because we've got a different idea of how things are going to work moving forward. I don't have any partnerships at the moment, but I wouldn't be opposed to it in the future. But if I was considering it, I definitely want to sit down and have the chat about what do you see, I'd be asking them, what is it? Why do you want me to join you in a partnership? What is it you want from me? How am I going to bring value to what you're doing? And we'd look at that vice versa as well to ensure that we're making the right decision here. If it's just cash, then maybe that's not the best way to move. Maybe that's not the best thing. If it's just, hey, they need money. But if it's a win-win, it can be a great thing.
Good. Yeah, look, it's hard. And I think once you get to a level of experience and also success, your requirements become less. So, you don't need as much input from other people. But if you're starting out and you're a good practitioner, but maybe you're you're not good at looking at accounts and ledgers and things like that, it might be an idea to kind of partner up with someone that can keep an eye on that for you. But I want to kind of just segue a little bit into the practitioners that you have working with you. You deal with so many practitioners. You've got about 25 at the moment. And even if you're retaining a few long term, which you should be able to do given your experience, you're having to source new practitioners. I mean, you're not going to hold on to 25 out of 25. Some are going to want to leave and go just out of life experience. How are you finding retaining or attracting new practitioners? How are you finding that as a challenge? Is that something that you can shed some light on?
Yeah, sure thing. So first of all, just to clarify, I think we've got about 35 practitioners at the moment across locations. At Ryde, yes, I think it's 25, 26 at North Ryde, but there's other locations as well, and not too far away. But look, it's the same answer. It's like I've made mistakes quick enough, early enough to learn from them, that that paid off in the long run. I'll give you a quick story, and that will probably paint the picture of it really well. And that is, like most of us, we when we open up a practice, we kind of do what everyone else is doing around us. It might be a percentage split model with people. It might be employing them, putting on a rental. There's different models, and they all have pros and cons. There's no right or wrong, really. But we've all gone through that. I'll use a percentage split as an example. There might be an initial 6 months or 12 months where you're not making any money off this person, this practitioner, and you're pouring every dollar you make off them back into building up their patient numbers, or training them. And then, there will come a point in time where they're starting to make good money. They're turning over good money, but then they see how much you're making off them, and they don't look at the 12 or 18 months or 2 years that you didn't make any money off them. They look at, hey, each week by week, this is how much you're making off me, and they start looking for greener pastures. And so over the early years, there were several practitioners, very talented practitioners, I lost simply because they felt they weren't on the best deal they could get. And in hindsight, I could have, well, I did find a way to get them on a better deal. I just didn't have the ability to do that at the time because we didn't have the economies of scale. If you've only got 8 or 9 practitioners, you can't give them as good a deal as if you've got 25. That's just the maths of it. But after a few years, I realized that, hey, if I want to allow this business to grow long term, I need to change my mindset, and rather than thinking of as the patient as the client, I'm going to start thinking as the practitioner as the client. And that's something that sometimes is a bit of a light bulb moment for people when they hear that. But I literally think the practitioners and therapists in my businesses as my client, and how do I help them achieve their professional and income goals. And if that means that, let's just say they can, if they're the type of person who wants to build up and see 50 to 60 patients a week, is it realistic to be making, say, a $2,000 a week margin on that person? Mathematically, yes. Can you justify it because of the training you put into them, and the fact that you maybe lost money off them for a couple of years prior to that point or leading up to that point? Yes, but they will leave. They will look for greener pastures. And so I've found that if I can have a model or a structure where they take the cream, they take the upside benefit, where they're going to, rather than me making, say, a $2,000 margin out of $5,000 or $6,000 turnover, if I'm making $1,200 or $1,300 or in that sort of, they're going to be happy. They're going to stay. They don't need to look for greener pastures because they're earning a great income for what they're doing. They've got autonomy over the way they practice. They can take time off whenever they wish, really, without even requesting it. And so I've sort of found myself in a model where the practitioner takes the upside benefit of being busy, and therefore, if they are so motivated and so inclined, they get busy and they start to do really well financially from that, and therefore they don't need to leave. Some may still leave for other reasons. Life takes them in another direction, but geographically or otherwise. But proudly, we've got several, actually over 10 practitioners now who've been here over 10 years. Wow. And I always say to them, my goal is to have you, you'd be crazy to leave. My goal is to have a structure where you'd be crazy to leave.
So basically what you're telling me is that you've figured out the win for you. You figured out what you need from them to make it a win for you, and then you've just left the upside for them.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Well, that's very smart, and it's an approach, I think, that's going to hold you well in the current marketplace, especially here in New South Wales, where we don't have a whole bunch of graduates that we're seeing. And this takes me to my next question, is that there's been a lot of discussion around different models of business practice. The most common one is the employee versus contractor. What you're doing right now seems more like a rental agreement, in a sense that you're getting a flat fee from somebody. You're figuring out what's a win for you, and then you've given them the upside. So the upside, their potential, is all theirs, which is great, because I think that helps with retention. But when you talk about contractor versus employee, you've experienced both models firsthand. You've had successes and failures on both. And can you share your thoughts on that debate, and where you think it actually works and where you think it actually doesn't? Like, where does the employee model work, and then where does the contractor model work? I mean, we know that you're one. I think what I've seen is that you can start people as contractors, and then when they get to a level, then you have to have a look at increasing their upside and minimizing your, what you take in terms of what makes it a win for you. But I think essentially you start people as a contractor and then work them up from there. And so can you just give us some of your insights on that contractor versus employee model?
Yeah, sure thing. So yes, we've had many people under each model. We've had a few dozen employees on salaries or some sort of combination of salary and bonus structure. We've probably the most common structure we've had is a percentage split, especially particularly in the early days. That was all we had. And then, you know, the concept of a flat fee or flat rental concept that has been part of the journey too over the past decade or so. And we've still got several people who are on that. We no longer call it a flat rental. We sort of refer to it as a facilities and service agreement, and the fee that we take or the amount we take might be a flat figure or it might be a percentage. Ultimately, that's what it is. It's either they're an employee or they're on a facilities and service agreement,
Right.
with it being percentage or flat fee. There's definitely no right or wrong. I mean, we've set up clinics with just employees and they work great, and the practitioner's happy and the clinic's making money. And I think that is particularly attractive to someone who needs a consistent base salary. That might be more attractive to a new graduate who, you know, wants to go into a role where there's a guaranteed income for a period of time. And that might also be particularly attractive to someone moving. So if they're moving from Melbourne to Sydney or from the Gold Coast to Sydney or wherever, having that guaranteed salary can be very attractive for, especially for, like, say, the first several months or a couple of years. What goes along with employment positions, of course, is, you know, the owner wants to utilize your downtime. So if you're not seeing patients, they're going to give you a list of responsibilities to fulfill during your downtime. Often they're tasks that practitioners don't necessarily want to do, whether it be reception coverage or cleaning or equipment maintenance. There's definitely things in there that they should be doing, whether it be networking, creating content to promote themselves, ensuring their clinical notes and patient communications are as great as they can be, as good as they can be. But there's also, you know, if you've got an employed practitioner and they've got a couple of hours free in their week with nothing on, you're going to try and fill it with a task that's going to, you know, be useful. I tend to find, at least, you know, within a couple of years, practitioners don't want to be employees. They want to utilize that downtime for themselves, whether that be just going home early or watching something on Netflix. And so I have had very few practitioners who were employees over the years on a salary want to remain on a salary after a couple of years. They all tend to want to switch onto something that gives them more autonomy in the way they choose to practice, and particularly their hours. And so where I'm sitting right now in North Ryde, literally every single practitioner here works for themselves. And there's benefits to them for that. There's benefits to us as well, but there's also benefit, you know, it's lower risk. We can't lose money on any individual one of them, because if they're quiet, they make less money, and we'll make less money, but we don't lose money. Whereas if they're salaried, then there's, of course, times of the year and times of the week where we would lose money on them. But across the whole year, of course, maybe not. But you know, being self-employed, there's a lot of benefits to the individual, especially when it comes to what you can claim as a cost against your business for tax. Also, in terms of, I'm not a financial planner, I'm not an accountant, so I've got to be careful what I say here. But there's ways to structure your income which may be more tax effective, especially as life progresses from you being a young person who's by themselves to a stage of life where you might have a mortgage, you might have a partner and kids. There's ways to be tax effective with your income, and those opportunities are not necessarily available if you're on a salary.
Yeah, sure. And do you find that there are certain market forces that work better for, say, I mean, you're somebody who's got a large clinic, and you know, if you've got an abundance of people that are looking for jobs, you know, would that be a better market force for having an employee model versus, say,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's obviously the landscape at the moment in Australia is there's a whole bunch of graduates coming out of Melbourne, and also an amount of graduates coming out of northern New South Wales and Queensland, and so I think those markets there have lent themselves to the employee model a little bit nicer than what we could do here in Sydney. Now it's probably a bigger conversation than that, but that's a large part of it. Also, I want to ask you, if you have a superstar, you know, if you find yourself a unicorn, a real superstar practitioner, even though they're a young graduate, you can just see something, this person's going to be successful. Are they going to be an employee for you?
Probably not over the long run.
No.
They're probably going to end up wanting to work for themselves.
Yeah.
Partly that is because I'm quite honest with them about the benefits of setting up their own company structure or trust structure and seeking out advice. My goal is to help them achieve their professional and income goals. So I want to take them on a journey where they, the first few years might be focusing on just becoming a brilliant clinician, and then maximizing your income within the hours you want to allocate to table time. Generally, I say to people, at least in my businesses, about 30 hours a week of table time is usually sufficient for most. You can maintain that for decades. You can have sprints for a few years at a time where you can do 50 hours a week of table time, but most practitioners are not going to sustain that for too long. And so, 30 hours a week of table time, plus a few more hours a week to work on your business and build your own profile, that is a sustainable path. And if you can become a great practitioner, maximize your income, get it up to a level where you can live a good quality of life on that, and then take it one step further and structure your finances effectively so you're not spending more than you need to on taxes and investing a portion of your income over the long run. There's no reason why over a 10, 15-year period where you can't be having a fantastic quality of life and not having to look for greener pastures, not having to look for a change in career or change in location to meet your financial goals and your living cost needs, because you're doing with within the profession you've already studied. And so because I'm open to people and say, hey, here's a path you can follow to be earning probably a lot more than what you thought and working a lot less than what you thought, there's no reason for them to sort of change.
So look, if you've been practicing for a few years and you feel like you're ready to open your own clinic, how would you do that how would you do that in today's market? Give us some, maybe not, step by step would be nice, but what are, say, the top 3 to 5 things that you need to know, if you're going to just start your own clinic from scratch? Say, outline the top 3 things that you need to really understand very well. Hello everyone, just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So the 2 best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy, and back to the show.
Yeah, sure. I think if you want to make it easy for yourself, you would look at the saturation in the area of practitioners, not just osteopaths, but other hands-on manual modalities as well, and ask yourself the question, could this area benefit from another practitioner? Like, are the practices that are already there turning away patients? Do they have appointments available in the next week, or are they turning, can they fit you in an hour from now? Looking at different geographical areas and asking yourself the question, where do I want to practice, and is there actually going to be a market need for it? Often a phrase I'll use is go big or go home. And I don't actually mean literally go home, but I mean one business structure or clinic structure that can be quite profitable and successful is just keeping your costs low. And that might be working from home, or it might be working from a very affordable commercial space. And, you may not put reception on, you may not spend a lot in marketing. You're basically setting up a little space for you to practice and maybe 1 or 2 other people, but keeping costs low.
Could be a room in a gym, right? Could be like a room.
Could be a room in a gym. Could be a room in a gym or a room in a GP clinic. There's we sublease space out to other people who aren't technically part of our business, but they've got their own business and they just use part of our room space. There's osteopaths who do that all over in gyms and GP places and specialist centers, and even in things that have nothing to do with healthcare. I've seen osteopaths set up in accounting firms. So everyone else in the building is an accountant all there, and then there's an osteopath in one room. They're out there. And so, and then the opposite end of the spectrum of that is go big. So it's either keep costs low, and, in that sense, or go opposite, go so big that you can afford reception, you can afford a big marketing budget. And general rule of thumb, there'll be exceptions to this, but general rule of thumb, I find about 5 consult rooms is the magic number. I think if you've got 5 consult rooms or more, you're probably going to fit, depending on how you structure the week, between 8 and 14 practitioners, or across a mixed modality. And therefore, you've got the volume of people, you've got the economies of scale to put on reception, to have a marketing budget to generate high quality marketing material, to allocate tasks out across lots of different people so that the tasks are shared and the workload shared, and everyone can thrive and benefit off the economies of scale of it. There's plenty of clinics out there, and this is probably more the norm. There's plenty of clinics out there in that 3 to 6 practitioner size with maybe 3 or 4 rooms, and they're doing fine, but they don't necessarily, they're not using everything efficiently. They've got a receptionist who's taking 30 payments a day when they could take 130. They've got they're running ads when, for one osteopath, if they had 3 osteopaths, then, on a per practitioner basis, they're spending less for triple the outcome. And so that go big or go home is just something I've observed that tends to apply pretty well across osteopaths and as well as other, hands-on manual therapies. Other things that come to mind, decide from the very beginning what the business is going to look like in 2 years' time and 5 years' time, and build towards that. And so the mistakes I made early on is, I was, for lack of a better word, desperate for people to come and join me. So I went to the competition. I said, hey, come and join me and I'll give you a great deal. I just needed someone using the room to help cover the bills. And the mistake I made was giving them such a great deal, and basically saying, you choose when you want to work. And they might say, look, I want to work Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, and Saturday morning. You're done. They're going to get really busy working a few hours on a Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, Saturday morning. But then what do you do with the rest of the week for that room? And so I always encourage people to say, think about the whole week and go, okay, how are you using the week efficiently for all of your services? Just yesterday, I came across a clinic that's got they've got a podiatrist using one of their rooms, and the podiatrist only pays a rental on the days the podiatrist is there. So there's 7 days a week, and this podiatrist uses the room 3 days a week. And because of all of his podiatry equipment, he doesn't want anyone else using the room. And the clinic's allowing him to pay a rental or a use fee for 3 days, but they're not making any other income from that room for the other 4 days a week. Because of the value of this equipment in the room. And I'm thinking that seems inefficient to me. So, if you're going to set up a practice, think about, okay, how do I want it to be used over in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, and work towards that. Don't, have a plan and follow it.
Okay. And setting up a clinic, I mean, when you have a clinic and you run a clinic, do you see that as a route to huge financial upside, or is it just the cash flow means to invest and diversify? Like, so, are you going to be a millionaire kind of running your clinic, or is it just the cash flow means where you can go and invest and look at trading, look at property investment, things like that? Is that something you can?
I think it's possible. I think everyone starts off with the idea in their head that it's going to be the pathway to riches, and it can be that pathway to easy lifestyle and making lots of money. But I think that's not the normal experience. I think for most people, that they over the first 3 years, even maybe 5 years, they're not actually earning any more money than what they would have if they just kept working with someone else. Especially if they kept working with someone else and negotiated, the deal so that it was slightly more in their favor. Where it was still win-win. The practice is still making money off them, but they're making good money and they may be making the cream. But it's definitely not a guaranteed pathway to follow where you're going to be like, driving around in a Lamborghini and spending your days sitting on a beach drinking cocktails. It's unfortunately that's the truth. And look, I think for most people, the skill set, you need to be a great osteopath or a great practitioner, not necessarily the same as what you need to be a great business owner. And so a lot of us find ourselves running clinics when we may not be, well, I think I do an okay job, but there are definitely people out there who are running clinics who, they regret might be a bit strong of a word, but it's a lot tougher than what they thought it would be. And
the personality differences
as freely as they thought it'd be.
The personality differences are there between the healthcare workers who are quite agreeable and tend to kind of let things go versus, being somebody who is looking at the inefficiencies in business like you are. You've identified those. You've said, hey, hold on, no, I'm not going to lease you that room, for 3 days a week and have it sit there 4 days a week doing nothing, and that's a different approach between having the approach of somebody who's just willing to be more agreeable, So I get what you're saying there. And so I guess my experience is that clinics really offer you good cash flow if you know how to grow them properly, and you can use that cash flow really wisely and set yourself up for better financial rewards. I think either in property or in the in the financial markets. What I do want to ask,
that's the message I give my guys is I basically say to them,
Yeah.
look, if you can maximize your income in your profession doing a 30-hour table time week, and then I call it the rule of 15, and I'll probably elaborate this more, give examples more in one of my own videos, but I generally say to them, look, if you can save 15% of your income and invest it, for 15 years and compound it, every month add another 15% of your income and compound that over 15 years, an average return of 15% per annum, which seems high, but it is achievable with a bit of volatility. Then after 15 years, your annual return from your investments now exceeds your active income.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to go out there and leave the practice you've built a client following in and set up on your own and risk hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life to have a financially successful life. You just follow the proven mathematical formulas that lead to wealth further down the line, which is spend less than you earn, pay off the debt, start to invest in long-term assets over time that go up in value and generate cash flow. And that arguably it's easier to do outside of running your own business through financial markets and property than doing it through your own business.
Yeah, it is. So now that you've been involved in this business for a while, you've been an osteopath since 2009. Where would you like to see osteopathy, especially in New South Wales and probably in Sydney, because that's where would you like to see it go? What would you like to see happen here in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Oh, look, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd love to have a university opening up this year somewhere in Sydney that's bringing in 100 students a year and graduating 100 students a year 5 years from now. These things take time. I think, everybody knows it, that most graduates, coming out of Melbourne universities or those on the Gold Coast and Lismore, they're staying in those regions generally. And it makes sense because they've established themselves up there. They've got friends and family and partners in those areas. And it's, to up and move 1,000 kilometers away is hard. Where would I love it to be in 5 years' time from now? Well, of course, I'd love to have it that we've got more graduates wanting to move to Sydney or graduating in Sydney. Part of the solution might be having, salary positions available for new graduates, so they're more likely to move to Sydney. That would be part of the picture. It probably wouldn't be the magic solution for everyone. But getting the university going, I think is what we all need.
That's the answer. I think that's getting the course, and we have to have a look at some ingenious ways of maybe restructuring what we do to kind of make it more viable, especially now that universities are run like businesses rather than educational facilities. They need to make some money and make sure that we're in line with that. So look, just to wrap up today, I want to ask you one more question. What's one thing you've learned in the last 2 years that you wish other people knew, especially in our industry? Like, what's one thing you've learned that you think other people would benefit knowing about?
You don't have to do everything yourself. One of the secret shortcuts to getting, progressing faster, whether it be building your career or building a business or just progressing through life, is, almost everything you're going to do in life, someone else has already done it beforehand and either failed or succeeded. And so if you can accelerate your progress by going to those who've succeeded or failed before you and getting advice, it's only going to speed things up.
Yeah.
If making a mistake, whenever you do anything, you either get it right or you learn. Whether that be treating a patient or doing something in business, like a marketing activity or whatever it might be. And so, utilize the industry, reach out to those around you. I think most practitioners, for the most part, are nice people and are happy to receive a message from someone and help them out over a phone call or a beer.
100%.
I think, reach out, ask the question. Worst case scenario, someone says no, and it's probably someone else you can ask anyway. So don't be afraid to ask for advice and seek help. Yeah,
there's nothing new under the sun. And if you're usually struggling with something, someone else has struggled already and has maybe not found the best path, but at least a path that's got a bit of less resistance. So if you want to learn about something, the best way to do it is to go and find someone who already knows what they're doing and ask them. So that's great advice. Kev, mate, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a little bit rocky, this podcast, but hopefully no one will know what we went through once we edit it and put it all together. But I appreciate you being patient with me, mate. I know you're a busy man, and I guess we'll see you around in the osteopathy circles. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Sammy. Thanks for the chat.